Welcome to DeFi Expectations, World on Fire Part 3. I'm actually not sure why we called it World on Fire because everything's great on my end. I got my girlfriend moving in, adopted this beautiful Labrador pupperson. He's been fitting into the family so well. We're all looking to move into a bigger apartment. Everything's great on our end. I've never been happier. I don't remember. Why are we doing this episode called World on Fire, guys? Is something wrong? Is something going on elsewhere that other people aren't so happy?
I think you are on fire. Your world is on fire, like in a positive way.
I think so. I guess Fry is very appropriate in that regard. But no, everything is fucked everywhere else, though, apparently. Just like I said in parts 1 and 2, I just haven't been paying as much attention to it as of late. But we got a lot of crazy shit going on. I mean, things are so nuts right now that the government's about ready to admit that there are little green men that exist, aliens possibly. They'd rather admit that than half the government is full of pedophiles. That's how wonderful things are going right now. But that's just my take. I'd love to hear your guys' take today. Please introduce yourselves and we'll dive into some of these subjects. I mean, people know who you are, but let me know what you want to contribute to the subject and how you've been watching things as of late.
You want to go first, Teddy, or shall I go first?
I'll give you the honors.
Okay. Everybody knows me, so I'll skip the introduction. But, on my end, things are also okay. So, no world on fire here. But, looking at the landscape and looking at Iran and the US and China and all the things that are happening right now, I thought it was like a good idea also to sort of do an evaluation of where we are now, like after the first 2 episodes when things were still, developing and looking very dangerous. Well, they're still very dangerous and looking grim, right? Because the blockade is still there. The US is now blockading Iran. So it's like a blockade of a blockade. And they just had a meeting, Trump with Xi. It's kind of unclear to me what came out of it because you got like 2 totally different perspectives on what happened there. And since the blockade with Iran is still ongoing and there's no clear resolution to it, and there's even talks of starting bombing again with Israel, and Iran of course has his demands, like a restoration, full reparation for the cost, and a full opening of Hormuz, and them taking their slice of the traffic and all of that stuff, which is non-negotiable to Trump. I don't really see how they can open it, and then the longer it takes, the worse it gets, right? And then the latter part of this year will be really bad for a lot of people, including me, probably in Europe, as food prices start to spike and energy prices rise further, I imagine, and basically the prices of everything start to become very problematic, and governments have to start printing. But at the same time, governments also have to start raising rates because of the inflation. So it's like a double whammy and a catch-22. And so I'll stop there and give the word to Hedy.
So I'm Hedy or Brendan, depending on which way you want to call it. So, I think some people know me. Most people don't know me. So obviously I have my own podcast, done a few other things. Nick and I have done a lot in the past as well. So thank you for inviting me on here. As far as the world on fire, as Nick said, I don't think it's actually on fire. I think it's rhetoric, and it's to keep us on the hamster wheel because there's fire outside. Let's not leave the hamster wheel. I think we'll get into Trump's meeting with Xi because I think that's really important, especially the delegate he took. I think that's more telling than anything, the delegate, and that it's been so quiet because generally there's a lot of fanfare, and the reason that I think there's something might or may not come, good or bad, I don't know. Hormuz is the Strait. The thing that hit me this week is, which we can get into and debate a bit, is that I think this was price gouging. We had enough oil and they were just gouging. So then we went from gold, then we went to silver, now we're on oil. What's the next thing? I don't know. Silicon, cobalt, lithium. What are we gonna play on Polymarket this week? Is where we're at. No, I genuinely believe we're in a big casino. We know that everything's spiraling downward, and we're in that casino stage of everyone trying to grab as much resource as possible. Obviously, we'll talk about Bitcoin. Store of value, medium of exchange, perhaps. Let's see. I don't think the world is on fire. I
appreciate that perspective too, because I think you're right, Hattie. It feels like it is pretty much a casino at this point. And I think it's interesting because it seems like the play is just to do the opposite of what they say. And I remember when I was seeing headlines all over X about how banks were literally just on a gold run, like they were just filling their vaults with gold, and how gold is just literally like the number one thing you can buy right now because it's nowhere but up, right? And it was right around $5,200 an ounce. It suddenly just dropped, and it was on to the next thing. And then we started to see the same thing with oil. And I think me and Nick were both in the boat of thinking that oil was going to surpass $120 a barrel. And then you saw Trump come out and do a little bit of market manipulation, talking about how some deals were made and this was going to be over really soon. And you see this sharp drop. And then, of course, it goes right back up again because the deal was bullshit. I think that'd be an interesting place to start before we move on to Z for sure, because, I am more interested in Z, but I'm just wondering if to start by focusing on what was going on with this situation with Iran. What was so crazy to me is it seems like Trump is doing the same thing now with his other negotiations, saying that everything is completely resolved, we're all good to go. And meanwhile, we hear from China, well, positive talks were had, but nothing's been decided yet. You know what I mean? It seems like he's doing the same thing over and over again. And really at the end, to your point, Hattie, about it being a casino, it seems like there's people who are winning through this market manipulation, but it's not really the rest of us. It's not those of us who aren't in this big club. So yeah, I guess we could start by saying, what has happened with the Strait of Hormuz situation? Has anything gotten any better? What's the point of this? What is the point of this, or even pretending exists? But who's actually benefiting? I'd love to hear your perspectives on that, and then we're going to see what correlations there are with the situation in China.
Yeah, no, so my take is not very different from your take. Clearly there's market manipulation. Actually, Iran has called Trump out a couple of times of doing exactly that and manipulating the markets. And of course, you've got paper oil that is sort of suppressing the market. But the point that people like Luke Roman make, and even Lynn Alden and Michael Howell and many others, is you got like real commodities underneath this upside down pyramid, and you can manipulate so much. But at some point, you do have to have physical delivery of the goods. And if that delivery does not materialize, that does have impact on prices, right? So you can only manipulate so far. And I totally agree also with what Hattie said. Like basically, we're in a sort of commodities rush, right? So this is sort of the start of like a gigantic commodity cycle, which I think is also good for Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is a commodity and it has been classified as such. So I do, and it's a digital scarcity, right? So it's a scarce commodity. So I think it will do very well, especially with the AI boom that's just around the corner, and this sort of electrification and commodity rush and redistribution of wealth that we see. So the way I look at Trump, he's very sort of processmatic, right? So to me, it still looks very much like Trump 1. Only it's all much bigger and crazier and excessive and riskier. But he's very sort of, he does one thing and then he moves on to the next, and then he moves on to the next. So you clearly saw that with Greenland, sort of he was in negotiations with what I think he was just coming out of Venezuela, and then, moving to Iran, and then Greenland played up. And then so he moved sort of back to first finish up, check mark, green mark, and then go to Iran. And now sort of Iran is sort of nearing check mark, at least, I think that's what he thinks. And then he can sort of move on to the next thing. So he's very, which is, you know, I think also ties into the UAP thing that's happening right now. But he's sort of very sort of processmatic. And in my piece on Iran from about a month ago, I also mentioned that, you know, China and probably also Russia, but especially China behind the scenes is, you know, trying to negotiate and sort of come to an agreement on Iran, I think is my perspective, because, you know, China is being hit hard with energy. So perhaps as we move on to the meeting with Xi, I think Trump does hold some big cards in his hand. Xi also holds big hand, has also a big hand of strong cards, but and that's why I called it the bifurcation of the world. My take on it is actually that there's a transaction between both of these superpowers, and I think they will divide the world, where Trump will get like the Western Hemisphere, and China will try to get the eastern part. And yeah, I'm not sure if anyway, that's how I see it.
Hattie, how about your perspective on that? Do you think that's basically accurate?
I think there's a lot. Commodities are definitely under play, because commodities were spoken about, was it 3 years ago? So BRICS is actually based on commodities. So we're just seeing that play out, where we're seeing that China and Russia and the other BRICS nations have gone heavily into gold, which then we had a run on gold. Paper gold got smashed, as you saw, from like people were drawing. I think it was like an 8-week waiting period to get it out of London, so for delivery, and they were actually going out to the market and buying from the market, which meant I have two different theories on it. I think perhaps people are calling out the paper, and maybe it might be they're trying to create a softer landing. So the US cannot compete with BRICS because of GDP. So I think there will be two financial systems. I do still think the dollar will be BRICS fails if the dollar fails and the world fails. At the moment, there's no exit plan out of the US dollar. You can't just turn on a new world currency. So I think the commodities is coming out of BRICS. So that's high pressure. I think people are playing the casino because everyone's trying to make as much money as they can, because they know the crash is coming, which means I need to have as many dollars as possible in order to buy as many assets as possible. So it's just one big game. I think breaking out the world, we have another layer, which is we have Russia, China, and the US fighting for their spheres of influence. And they have an agreement. So they're all going to agree where their influence lies. So the US has pulled back from Europe. Russia's obviously pushing against Europe. Europe is pushing back. I don't think Europe has what it needs. As much as people talk about it, I don't think Europe has enough. They can't fight a war of attrition. They haven't got enough ammunition, and they certainly haven't got enough money to go and buy enough weaponry.
No.
China and the US will sell them as much as they need. So I think there's this big game afoot. Yeah. The one thing I do think that we maybe want to touch on is brain drain. I think that's the name of the game at the moment. I think we have a huge brain drain going on, not only out of Europe, which has been happening for a long time. It's happening in China. It's happening in Russia. So the US is sucking a lot of intellect. And I think people have underestimated what that means. And if China's definitely going to build some factories in the US, that's a complete shift. And I think it makes sense to build in the US, especially with the US securing energy. I think it makes sense for them to be there, tariffs and energy, and China looks after the other side. Not to forget, I don't know if you've watched Predictive History. At the moment, China is pinned. So the US owns the seas, like Britannia owned the seas. And there's a very narrow band of which they can get their energy resources, whether it be overland or via sea. But sea, they're choked. So I think people forget that China's actually choked by sea at the moment. And that's why they put so much emphasis on building these ships, so much emphasis on their drones, so much emphasis on their navy, because they're trying to, again, push out their sphere of influence. And that's why they're signing agreements with the little micro islands that are around there to try and get more reach like the US got to attack. So it's really large. It's very difficult to unpack and tease out all the little elements.
Again, I totally agree. I think, the BRICS are the factory of the world, as they say. And it didn't make a lot of sense that the factory of the world was, doing all their work basically for green pieces of paper that were being diluted. So they rebelled. But that means, like, if the factory divorces from the service economy, then the service economy has a big problem, right? Because you can't print medical stuff or food or oil or whatever. So you need like some kind of understanding between these two blocks. Like you said, they need the dollar because the transactions worldwide are still functioning on dollars, even though they do worry about the stablecoin move from the US as it sort of entrenches on their territory and their sovereignty, which is basically, remember Facebook with Libra, and then there was this gigantic pushback against Libra because it would undermine sovereign nations with sort of like a business model, a global intranational business model. So basically the US is doing the same thing with their stablecoin move, which is problematic, of course, from China's perspective and Russia's perspective. And then I think it also makes sense from that perspective to have a neutral monetary layer that you can use to transact with each other that nobody can manipulate, which used to be gold, of course, in history. But, we got something better at the moment, which locks into the future that we're building, and that's Bitcoin. So if everybody starts mining it in their own territories, even though they don't trust each other, they can have like a neutral settlement layer between central banks or between banks and, designated parties. So I think that's where Bitcoin fits into this whole thing. But what you also mentioned is, I think, also not often talked about, but it's not just about energy. It's also about, the straits, right? Panama, the Strait of Panama, the Strait of Hormuz, got the Bering Strait, but you also got the Strait of Malacca, right? So these are like choke points where you can basically copy paste the tactics of something like Iran, like a very low power, basically. I mean, even though Iran is advanced, but at the moment it's very low grade because they bombed the hell out of it, and they're still functioning like Ukraine level. And Ukraine is getting help from Japan because Japan just lifted its export restrictions of weapons. So they are now, turning their know-how and technical expertise in order to mass produce drones for high-end drones for Ukraine. So Ukraine is turning into the superpower I was hoping it was not turning into. But one of my predictions from years ago was that Ukraine would probably form the new heart of Europe. And by God, I hope I'm wrong, because that would be really bad. But you saw, Stratford, right? With Friedman, I think his name is, and they war gamed the Russia invasion of Ukraine like years before Russia invaded Ukraine, and America was always, going back and forth. Should we back Poland or Ukraine? Which one is, more important? And it seems they have chosen for Ukraine because it's probably more corrupt and more easily to handle. And Ukraine has a lot of Bitcoin, by the way, which is very interesting. But yeah, I think Europe has a big problem with brain drain. Lots of other countries, I think small countries like Bhutan and El Salvador are profiting immensely from this brain drain because, I'm also thinking like, where should I go if things really get messy? And those kind of countries are on my list, of course, and some others. And the US is, of course, despite not having all the best cards in the deck, it is playing the cards that it has very well. And I think they're playing defensive. Like, I think Trump is a Jacksonian isolationist. Only I think in this global world that we've created, where everything is interconnected, you cannot isolate yourself anymore in the traditional sense. America cannot retreat into America, right? Then it would lose. So it is, I think Trump is an isolationist, but I think what is happening is that the Western Hemisphere, Northern America, Central America, and South America, and Greenland are consolidating into one bunker, so to speak, and then it will be like a magnet that forces traditional allies and perhaps new allies to lock step with the new US because they need energy and they're starving of energy. And so it's forcing their hands to choose between either falling in line with China and Russia or falling in line with the US. And I think the US does have a slightly stronger hand than China.
I'd like to talk a little bit about that hedge that average retail traders, investors, the common man, people like me, what are we supposed to do in the middle of all this? Or we have political leaders playing us like chess, getting involved in these bigger international games that we can pretend we understand it, but really the media is spinning us in circles ourselves. It's hard to really know what you're supposed to do during these times. I love what you said, Nick, about Bitcoin, because it's true that in the middle of all this is energy, and everyone who understands Bitcoin understands that Bitcoin is the perfect connection of time and energy, essentially. And I think that that's incredibly important in an asset, but we also can't ignore the fact that we have BlackRock and other mainstream institutions coming into Bitcoin decentralized finance, and not just through laws, but through sheer ownership, changing a lot of things about it, to where literally we can be dumped out on any second. And even if you want to hold your Bitcoin to the end, we feel that pressure, as does all retail. When the world's falling apart around us, we have bills to pay, and suddenly it just becomes magic internet money to us because that's what they want us to view it as, and not the key to our sovereignty. Do you think that the solution is just to just hold on to Bitcoin, to just hold that like no other, and Ethereum and other blockchain decentralized technologies? Or do you think that that there's also an important focus here with artificial intelligence? Do you think that these are the two ways of representing energy right now that we can best view as investments to the future to survive whatever outcome comes of all this? That's kind of my question for you guys.
Can I take this one first? Because I have a very strong view on it. First of all, this is not financial advice in any measure. I'm not an expert by any means. Especially with timing, I'm off by a lot, and also with prices. So I'm a long-term investor, and I do these things just because I see it like that. So please don't copy me. But the way I view it is, Bitcoin is the money of the future. I think there's also clear alignment in my view between AI and Bitcoin, but that sort of deserves an episode on its own. But I think also, like what we talked about with energy and Bitcoin, there's also a very strong link there. With space and Bitcoin, there's a very strong link there. But most of all, my thesis has always been basically based on Jim Rickards' thesis from many years ago. I read all his books, and his prognostication is pretty accurate so far. But he always said there would be like an SDR, like a special drawing right, because fiat money is basically on its way to the bottom, like a race to the bottom, who can devalue, and you see the dollar is falling, right? Which attracts capital because then you can buy more. But the point is, gold was sort of like the traditional hedge. So for Jim Rickards, it was always the SDR and gold, right? But you can update both of these things, right? For me, you can replace gold with Bitcoin because it's basically the same thing, only, in my view, better in many ways. Not every way, but most ways. And then the other thing that you can also update is the SDR. And basically, he admits, right, because there will be a digital blockchain-based SDR. So, the special drawing right will also be a crypto blockchain of some kind. And you see many papers from the Bank of International Settlements to the IMF, where they, for example, talk about Ripple and some other ISO, standardized chains. They have this rule book that's there. I'm not saying these coins will be selected, as some of the tribalists believe, but I do think they will build something along those lines. And the point is, so Bitcoin is one of those things, and this also indicates that crypto is not going away. AI is definitely not going away, because all this stuff that's happening right now, this great game 2.0, it's all connected to AI, right? AI is at the center, at the heart of it. So yeah, I think AI is not in a bubble. I mean, it is in a bubble and it's not in a bubble, right? It will hit sort of speed bumps along the way and crashes along the way, but everybody is incentivized to build AI, no matter what happens, these governments are going for it and these companies are going for it. There's like a game theory dynamic behind it, and they're not going to stop, and they sacrifice whatever they need to sacrifice to win this race. So yeah, AI is definitely also a good trade, in my opinion. And then you need to run this whole thing, and you need a lot of commodities, like a lot of commodities. So, and I want to play this clip because it's hilarious and it sort of fits what I'm saying. But I'm not that big of a fan of Pompliano, but this one was gold. Let's go. Is it there, by the way? Yeah, okay, it's there.
If we put Bitcoin aside for a moment, what do you say to the bears who are pounding the table that AI is a bubble, we're way overextended, the market's overbought? What do you say to that?
Their head's a bubble. That's what I think. Their head's a bubble, right? Why? Because they got stupid ideas in their head. They've packed so many dumb ideas in their head. And you ask them, okay, explain to me why it's a bubble. And they literally will tell you things like, in 1942, when horses were riding around, like, shut up, right? And then you go and they'll say, oh, the PE ratio is this, and a decade out, it's the lost decade, blah, blah. Do you understand what the United States is doing right now? The United States is going from an antiquated industrial revolution. Then we went into what I call kind of the electronic age, which was Facebook and all this stuff. And we realized we do not have the infrastructure to support how much demand is coming. And the reason why I say that the bears' heads are a bubble is because they cannot comprehend the fact that the AI agents are going to drive more demand than the humans. They do not understand exponential demand. They do not understand exponential growth. They literally sit with their spreadsheets. And if you said to them, AI can now do your spreadsheet, they would be like, no, I want to use my little feather and I want to dip it in ink and I want to do it myself. That is how crazy these people are. And so you look at it and you say, okay, if AI agents are going to increase demand, both in terms of they're creating more content than humans. So already the data shows AI agents create more content than humans create in a given year. What do you think is going to happen? You think it's going to reverse? All of a sudden humans, we're going to get like, instead of 10 fingers, we're going to get 20 and we're going to type on our computers more often? No. So that is just starting. What do you think it's going to look like in 5 or 10 years? This is an explosion of demand. So you go back to, okay, what do they point to? They point to historical valuations. Guess what? We never had $1 trillion company before. Now we got a lot of them. Okay, does that mean that is Apple overvalued? Right? Is Berkshire overvalued? Let's just go through all the $1 trillion companies. So, okay, put that aside. Valuation stuff is literally dumb. Second is if you go and you look at and you ask them and say, okay, explain to me specifically where if demand is outstripping supply, the only way you get the market to roll over is supply has to now be an oversupply compared to demand. Show me any single one of these shortages where the supply is growing at a faster rate. I'm not even asking you to show me a place where there's oversupply yet. I'm just show me a trend line where the supply is growing faster than the demand. Commodities, chemicals, data generation, data power, energy generation, all this, there is nowhere. And so you go back and you say, your head's a bubble because you have packed it with so much academic information. and you are sitting staring at charts like you are an astrologist. Instead, think from a first principle standpoint. There's not one person that I know that thinks from a first principle standpoint that is even remotely considering that there is some big bubble that is ready to pop.
Well, I had, it was just, this classic. There's a stand-up comedy combined with macro analysis.
Yeah, it's well worded too, and we don't really realize that at the core of pretty much everything we demand, AI can solve, and that really puts it in a class of like nothing we've ever seen before, especially with the exponential growth that he's talked about. It's something that someone recently on LinkedIn described to me as like a phase 3, and he talked about where phase 1 and 2 is basically like moving into from like industrial age output, your input equals a certain amount of output, to like the digital age, to what we have now. And it's like nothing we've ever experienced before. So your ability to chart it in the same way, the same archaic principles that we followed upon before, it's basically the same as, dipping a feather in some ink and writing on some parchment paper what you think the key to the future is.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think another thing is, well, the one thing that sort of worries me, or where I'm a little bit hesitant, and why I'm sort of more thinking about it in longer terms, is first of all, well, it has to do with the change, right? We went from a different kind of QE to a new kind of QE. So we used to be in a Federal Reserve kind of driven QE, quantitative easing. And that's like a spigot. So it just, flushes the market with liquidity, and it just, moves Wall Street and it moves all markets, and everybody is having a party, and like there's no tomorrow. But they changed it, and that has to do, of course, with the amount of debt that's outstanding. We're about to reach $1 trillion of deficit spending a year, which is, right? So they're buying the short end of the curve, and they're doing it with treasury bills, right? So the treasury is driving this new kind of QE, and the treasury is not a spigot; it's a hose, right? And you can direct the hose where you want the money to go, like more or less. And in that way, the U.S. is copying, or forced to follow China, right? Because China has been doing this for a long time. It's basically the government that is driving their market, and driving the direction of the market, and saying what should be invested in, what's not, like the Belt and Road Initiative and the real estate, and now AI. And basically it's forcing America to follow their program. And with the treasury, with the shift to the treasury QE, they can of course direct that flow of money into specific areas of the economy by fiscal spending, right? So fiscal spending is sort of more like directed spending, and of course it also comes into other places, and it also filters into stock markets, but basically this allows them to say, okay, we want to win the AI race, so we're gonna put that money that we print, besides the growing deficit that they have to roll over faster and faster, which is taking a larger and larger chunk out of the money that they're spending. So even though the spending goes up, a larger chunk of the money that they're spending is actually consumed with debt and not productive. But the amount is left over to actually put somewhere is being put somewhere where they want it to go, which at the moment is AI, right? Because they want to win this AI race, which is to the detriment of crypto and Bitcoin. And even though I think they do want to keep it at a certain level and not let it drop off the cliff, because if the bottom falls out of it, then they have a big problem. So I think they do want to sort of keep it grinding higher, but because we don't have a spigot, and because we're in a stagflationary environment, and on top of it, that you got the geopolitical risks. It keeps many retail investors who hardly have any money left anyway, and bigger investors on the sideline in hard assets and commodities, because they don't trust the current environment we're in. And that means that the markets are just not doing very much at the moment. and why we're basically chopping along until we hit liftoff.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that take, Nick. And it's funny because I see cynics on LinkedIn, and it's funny because these are even people who support decentralized finance, right? But they're posting things like, I saw someone post the other day about the cost of bananas over 3 years compared to the cost of Ethereum. And I definitely understand like that argument, but it's also like the very simple counter to that in my clue, the very low IQ counter to that would just be, when in doubt, zoom out, right? Because, I don't think bananas have grown as much as Bitcoin. So I think it just depends on what time frame you're specifically look at and what kind of narrative you're trying to argue for. I think what scares me really at the end of the day is I do see this big explosion in production, but who owns that production, right? Just the other day, I was talking to someone who was talking about something that I had discussed before. So my girlfriend and I were just having a conversation. She works at TradingView and does customer service. And I just was telling her essentially, it's a little scary to live in the world today. You must feel this way too. But basically, like, a lot of these jobs are going to be replaced with AI in no time at all. And she basically said to me, well, one of the guarantees I have is actually the regulation and the requirements that they have for compliance, that actually offloading an entire workload like this to artificial intelligence would not be possible. Because of the systems, the payment structures, all those types of things, and the compliance you have to follow to even interface with clients on certain situations, subjects. But basically, this client I was talking to the other day, he was talking about a product that would essentially add a governance layer between certain automations, webhooks, you name it, and AI agents, autonomous AI agents like OpenClaw, that would actually accomplish many tasks autonomously. And what was interesting is when he was looking at this, he was looking, of course, at some of the low-hanging fruit uses for DAOs and for other types of organizations. But I was looking at long-term end game, as I said, my God, a governance layer in between autonomous AI agents and automations. I said, you just described what could eliminate my girlfriend's job. and this is just somebody I talked to the other day. And this isn't the only person trying to build this thing. It's not like I'm giving away a secret or something. Everyone's trying to do this. They're trying to find some solution or another to solve the compliance layer, to solve the issue of, okay, I'm communicating with the customer, and of course, there's typically an automation or workflow that the person either deserves a refund or they don't. No problem. Like, why couldn't an AI agent handle that? But suddenly, in an extreme example, like there's all kinds of examples. We'll give you an extreme one. The customer starts threatening the company or something like this. Well, does this involve a legal issue? Do we need to escalate this? Now it goes to a human agent who manages it. But when you think about this now, you could eliminate a team of like 100 to have one person handle just the issues that have some kind of compliance need. And now all of a sudden, you've just reduced your overhead of your company in an extreme way. Even Coinbase recently was talking about the cutbacks they've made, and they noted AI automation as one of the reasons that they were actually doing the cutbacks, so that they could continue to be a lean company and be competitive, which I understand as much as I can. But how great is that for us if we rely on our customer service job? And suddenly it's just whoever owns the AI agents that basically runs the world. I don't really know how we protect ourselves against that future. I don't think it's with more government action or more regulation specifically, in my opinion. I think it's through tools like open source AI and really supporting initiatives that make information free to all. So that was just kind of like something I wanted to pitch to you guys, if you agree with that perspective, or if you have any other input on the issue.
You want to go first, Eddie?
Yeah, no. Governance is going to be huge. So the governance of everything is massive now. The reason for it is, like you pointed out, liability. So the biggest problem with AI in businesses is who is liable, i.e. who's responsible. So the AI, the artificial intelligence, will never, in the eyes of the law, be responsible. It will always be the administrator or the person utilizing it. So the company utilizing it. And as we all know, in most businesses, because we've worked in corporate, there's always a scapegoat, and we need to have a scapegoat. So you'll see compliance and governance growing in businesses. And that'll be a huge, which is a tip for everybody. Go and learn governance. Go and learn how can you build policies? How can you enact those policies? How can you protect that? That's going to be really, really important for everything we move forward for. I will push back on the 100 to 1 because I don't think we'll have a short period where everyone will. There's two parts to this. Everyone will automate and use AI to streamline their businesses. And what they'll do is there'll be a resurgence of coming back to, let's call it humanizing the business again. The reason for that is you'll see that you'll lose connection, we'll lose problems. Let's take the call centers. Yeah, we all have the jokes today. Everyone knows what they're all about. Everyone went call center, we outsource our call center. What happened? They lost customers. Why did they lose customers? Because they actually lost the connection, that human connection. And people were like, I don't know who I'm talking to anymore. And then you had like the call center where it was an actual like robot you were talking to. Yeah. It's like the voice, you're not talking to a real person. And we have that today. Humans are highly intelligent, whereby we can see whether, and we can feel intuitively if it's a real person we're talking to. I think it will get better over time. I think the other side that people are, it's very easy for businesses in an economic downturn to say that they're doing it for a specific reason. So here's my cloak and dagger. So Coinbase hasn't been doing that great. Their products, like the base layer, is working really well, the network. But again, I think it's cost saving in disguise, and I don't think it's the AI revolution. I just think that what they've done is they've used as an excuse. We're streamlining to be the AI business, blah, 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 and they've just cut staff. So I think it's just a really good excuse. We had it with the internet where people thought, oh, we're going to open up an internet store and then we don't need a physical store, so we'll get rid of all of these people. I think it's the same thing again. I think history repeats itself, or it rhymes. Let's not say it repeats itself. History rhymes often.
It's basically semantics, another way to describe corporate greed. I have another way to respond as well to what you said, but I'll allow Nick to jump in first.
No, I actually I don't have that much to add. I think Hedy is right to point out that that there will be probably a backlash. I think there's also like a societal backlash anyway, but you see sort of more and more Luddites who want to smash the machines, like literally, or just move out to the countryside altogether. But like a high skepticism towards AI and AI companies and technological development, which wasn't there before, right? Everybody used to love technology. Technology will save us, and now people are becoming like, oh, maybe this is not such a good idea after all. So you got like a societal, cultural backlash happening anyway, which will mean like more regulation, more restrictions, especially in Europe, but probably also elsewhere. And then, like Hedy says, a lot of these companies might be going too fast, too far, and have to roll back, or maybe fly out of the curb altogether. But I think there's another thing also, right? I have been having this back and forth with Grok and some other AIs about demographics, because my original view used to be that countries like China and Japan were sort of very smart and very at the forefront by sort of robotification of society, right? And I linked that to the remarks by Larry Fink, who I think 2 years ago mentioned during one of his talks that countries with a small population or an elderly population or a homogeneous population or all of the above are in a big advantage to, in comparison to countries with big populations and different kind of demographics. And he linked that, of course, to technology and robotification and this AI race that we're in. And then, these countries are easier to shift to this new future and also to allocate towards it, because they're more inclined towards robotification because the elderly need help, certain things need to be done and they don't have enough young people, etc., etc. But I keep being whistled back by my AIs and say, no, Nicolas, that's not like the whole story, right? You also have like 5 to 10 years in between where the countries who have the biggest and healthiest demographics are actually at advantage, because before you get from A to B, you do need like a lot of people, and especially young people, to get you there. And the countries like China, they are taking a huge risk. So maybe they get there with robotification, but it could also totally backfire, and then they're in a very difficult place, which is probably also why Taiwan is super critical for China, as they, lately they have been not beating around the bush about Taiwan, like stay away from Taiwan, or we have a big problem. But that's of course also because they really need Taiwan, right? They're far ahead in some ways, but with chips they still they're not there yet. So they're still like America and ASML in Holland. There's some places in the world where there's still a big advantage. So basically what I'm saying is, I think there's still room for people. And I think also, like, if you are a Luddite or somebody who wants to move to the countryside, I think that's also a growing business, right? I think there's more and more people who want to start communities or circular economies, like a new Amish, movement, only with high technology, and countries like El Salvador, Bhutan, and others that I already mentioned. So yeah, I think we still are in sort of like a period of change where there's still room for people and still room for innovation and reschooling. And so that's what. Plus, the only thing that I would want to say about what Hedy said is, I do think because of the AI race and the amount of money that is being pushed into it, that forces companies to invest into it too, because the prices keep rising and rising. And if you are too late joining the race, you basically get priced out of it. So you are forced to adopt.
Yeah, and I wanted to comment on a couple things. First, what you were just talking about with the support of circular economies. Definitely Ryan with Bitcoin Ranch is great evidence that there are people doing that successfully in the world. And it gives me a lot of hope and optimism that people can still be responsible and autonomous and taking agency for providing for themselves and their communities. I think that's really important. I agree a lot with what you said as well, Hattie. There was a couple points I wanted to touch on just because I'm pretty passionate about customer service because I've been working in it a big portion of my life. I worked for banks in customer service, like Wells Fargo. I worked with AT&T customer service and different phone carriers, as well as even debt collection. So I've handled every kind of realm of customer service, if you could call that customer service, you could imagine, but basically human interactions and what we expect from people. And where I might counter with you just a little bit is in terms of if we look at the exponential growth of AI and we look at how much it's advanced in the short period of time since it's in, we've really started to see it come out in like 2023 and the big advancements with GPT all the way up to GPT 4.0 and how human sounding it is. Like it's like you're talking to a person. You guys know how much that means to me with the Hotel Lyria project. But what I'm getting at specifically, and I'll kind of use a story to explain it because it also touches on, when you call for customer service or use a chat form and you're talking to someone in another country because they're literally paying as little as they can for the customer service. And they're literally outsourcing to companies that hire big teams of people being paid like practically nothing. So I had booked a hotel last minute in Batumi for a trip that I was taking with my girlfriend. And we get on the train. I had literally in the cab before I got there with my Expedia app, which I might still be dated even using Expedia at this point. I've heard there's even better options, but I get my free rooms once in a while when I use it enough, and it's pretty easy to usually find a good rate. But I hadn't really had a need for customer service in a while. So I booked the room and I get in contact with the people, because generally when you book a hotel room, often through these apps and they're cheap, you're not booking direct through the hotel. There's a lot of hotel rooms that were actually purchased by a private owner who is then basically renting the room to you for the night. And you're directly communicating with them to pick up your key, not the hotel itself. So I had gotten in contact with them only for them to advise that there was a mistake and they did not have a room available, and that Expedia was not supposed to say they had a room because they were all booked out. So I became incredibly upset about this. I said to them, well, can you please refund my money? They said, you're going to have to contact Expedia about that. I said, I can't. I'm on a train and I have really spotty Wi-Fi. We can't do anything. So I contact customer service through Expedia, which is a nightmare because my internet's going in and out on this train. I'm trying to use the train Wi-Fi, which sucks. I'm trying to use my phone Wi-Fi, garbage. Nothing's really working. But in between, I'm having this discussion with I don't even know who, but someone like Havminder in some other place who does not care, who's not really being really responsive very quickly to my needs. And I'm getting a little bit frustrated. And I'm just saying to him, look, they said there's no room available. Will you just refund my money? It's not even that much. Just give me my money back and then I'll book another room. And he's telling me that he can't reach them. Meanwhile, I'm on WhatsApp talking to them at the same time. I'm like, how can you not reach them? The phone number is right there. You should be able to contact them and confirm this. And if you can't reach them, how do you expect me to get my room? So there's no reason you shouldn't give me my money back. And he tells me, well, we have to wait 24 hours to resolve your case. And I'm just like, well, I'm not going to book another room with you and give you more money if I don't even know if you're going to refund money from the first need, right? So this was a nightmare to me. And here I am dealing with a person, of course, maybe not the best equipped person, the lowest cost person, the slowest responding person on a train with shitty Wi-Fi. But there's a human, right? But I'm still not getting the problem solved. Another customer service experience. So fortunately, I'll tell you this though, the people I complained and raised so much hell with them, the people I supposedly booked the room with, that they booked another room for me so that they wouldn't have to deal with me anymore. So it was solved, okay? Not through Expedia though, but through them and me complaining to them and raising hell. Another experience, I had a issue with Bolt, where basically I had called for a pet ride because of my Labrador Pupperson, and I have him ready to get into the car. And even though they say that it's a pet ride, some of the riders are very picky about what kind of pets they will accept. Okay. So this guy pulls up, he sees my Labrador, he touches him and pulls some hair off him and doesn't want that, he gestures to me that he doesn't want fur at his car, but refuses to cancel the ride himself. So makes me cancel the ride, which means I have a cancellation fee. So I get on the customer service app. I think it was either Bolt or Yandex. I can't remember. But it said something like, for resolution, please, it gave me the option of an AI agent. There wasn't a quick way to call or contact a live person. I'm like, oh God, this is going to be a nightmare because I haven't dealt with this in a while. But I'm like, there's no way the AI agent's just going to give me my money back. So I get on there. And I explained the problem just like I would with a human being. In seconds, I had my money back. It wasn't a problem. There was no hassle. I didn't have to deal with somebody through a long, extended conversation, through reasoning and just stress and all this pain. I had my money back in seconds. Now, I can tell you from that experience alone, if those were the only experiences I had to really govern my decision making, I'd say, fuck it, let's do AI. Because fuck it, I'm so tired of dealing with people. It's a nightmare. I'm so sick of this shit, And I understand our customer service experiences are more diverse than this, but we also look at GPT-4o and we look at how capable these systems are of being humanistic with us, of being like companions, to where people literally had memorials up on the GPT-4o deprecation day in front of OpenAI because they felt like their friends were killed, I can't help but feel like that exponential curve, maybe we've passed that. Maybe we just need more AI that's akin to what GPT-4o was, managing these situations and providing resolution. That would just be my one counter to it. Not that I'm not standing up for humans, but I think humans have created kind of a problem as well in this regard, to where we can't even rely on humans anymore to solve our issues. But I think it's a very complex issue.
And I think sort of we are on that exponential curve, right? Only I think, it's a hockey stick, and we're not like vertical liftoff yet, but we're getting close to vertical liftoff. So we're already on that exponential curve, and I think we're already sort of moving towards singularity, if you want to use that word. But I also wanted to respond to somebody in the comments, because that was about one of my earlier remarks about Bitcoin being sort of like a neutral settlement layer, or potentially neutral settlement layer, and that would be one of the attractive attributes of Bitcoin. And I'm not sure if the person agrees or disagrees, but I think it's she. She mentions he who controls energy controls empires, who controls money controls narratives, which is true, right? I mean, but I would say, if you look at what has happened the past 100 years from a superpower perspective, like either you are Russia, China, America, Iran, it doesn't really matter, who you are, and you assess, or you evaluate what has just happened, right? So basically, the lesson from the 21st century is exactly this: he who controls the money controls the world. So are these superpowers going to make the same mistake twice? And doing, again, sacrificing their sovereignty and submitting to US dominance, only then probably for 1,000 years, right? I mean, if they make the same mistake again, if these superpowers again submit to a system which is under control of one entity, and it doesn't matter who that entity is, right? It can be they or them, or the US or Israel or whatever. It doesn't really matter. But do you think these superpowers are so stupid that they're going to make the same mistake twice, right? I think they are not, right? Unless it's one big charade and they're all in it together and they're just performing a dance. And okay, then yes, but then we're already lost, and it doesn't really matter what we do at all. But I am still of the opinion that it's not all a charade. I think parts of it are theater and a charade, because you have to get your population on board. And in that sense, there's a lot of charading and theater going on. But I don't believe that at the top, everybody is on the same page and loves each other and gets along. Nothing in human history points to the fact that it works like that at the top. Nothing. Like, they hate each other's guts, and they're only forced into the same boat because there is no exit. But if you can get alternative boats and they're building them, then they're not going to make the same mistake twice. And that's why I think that's one of the reasons why I think Bitcoin will do very well, because these superpowers do know what Bitcoin is. And you only have to mine it in your own jurisdiction with your own energy. And then you can safeguard the neutrality and censorship-resistant aspects of Bitcoin. Right? So I think their incentives are actually aligned with Bitcoin's.
I mean, George Carlin always said it's a big club and you ain't in it, right?
Yeah.
But he never said that everyone is agreeable in this big club. They're more agreeable when they have shared interests, but really at the end of the day, everyone wants a bigger slice of the pie. And I think that's kind of relevant to this. Now, with regards to this quote, I think it's perfect, because I do believe that there's a purpose behind a lot of this chaos. I believe that the strongest empires in the world recognize exactly the truth of that quote. They also recognize that if you control the narrative, you control what people think, what people value in terms of energy, not just where they invest in energies. It could be, things like AI, which is a big consumer of energy and saver of energy and output in so many ways. Bitcoin, representative of energy, and of course oil, all of these things. But it's also when you control people's perspective of where they should spend their own energy, right? When you're able to control all of these things, you're able to amass as much energy as you want. And then thereby you continue to control an empire. And that's why I think the narrative is so important. And it's sad that we so often lose control of the narrative.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think what you also said earlier is like this whole sort of change that we see happening and these crises and the thing that I mentioned with the change from QE, Fed QE to Treasury QE, and maybe the abolishment of the Fed altogether, right? Because that's people are more and more of that opinion, or the merger of Treasury and the Fed, which is basically already happening. And the revolt from the euro-dollar banking system, the legacy banking system, sees, where's our part in this new system, right? What are we gonna do? The Clarity Act, all these kind of pieces, they've click together, and they create what could totally be a prison system, because with each crisis and each consolidation and with stable coins and all these things, the prison system becomes tighter and more centralized. And these other superpowers are doing the same thing, and they know what they're building, right? They know it's a prison system. So why would you want to be in the prison system of somebody else? Because the control only gets worse, right? So if you hated the dollar, why would you go into the petrol gas dollar if you don't have to, right? I wouldn't. So and then there's an exit. There's already an exit. It's Bitcoin. So why not use the exit?
Hattie, do you have anything else to add to that?
I have a lot to add, but mine is probably going. I always break it down to what are the incentives. So the biggest thing that I've been struggling with for a while now is we're incentivized to store our energy and time. That's the incentive. And what we've been given as a US dollar or a yen or a yuan or euro, whatever it is to store that time. Bitcoin's come along and said we can store it a different way, and it's with energy. I think everyone says fix the money, you'll fix the problem. And I don't think that's what it is. I think we need to fix the incentive and we'll fix the problem. The incentive is incorrect. So I'm still playing with it. I haven't got an answer to it, but that's what I'd add is we need to change the narrative, which is going back to what we were talking about earlier with the narrative is we need to change the narrative to fix the incentives. When we fix the incentives, then we can imagine something differently. But while we're still in this paradigm of the incentive being the US dollar or even being Bitcoin, we're not going to change the outcome. The outcome's going to remain the same. Bitcoin, as much as we all love it, can still be captured, and there are ways it can be captured, and we're watching that happen live. As much as people say it can't, there are ways to capture it. And if enough of us agree in that narrative, it will be captured, because we will give up the sovereignty of money that was given to us. We'll give that sovereignty up again.
Yeah, no, I agree with the latter part of what you said. I think people should be aware that it can be captured, right? And even in my positive scenario where different superpowers mine it on their own in order to keep their sovereignty, then you are still subject to those superpowers if you live in those countries, because they're not gonna, give you access to Bitcoin, right? That would be the last thing that they would want. So they want to build like a layer on top of Bitcoin, which is part of the prison system, and then keep the pristine collateral for themselves, right? So that's the game plan from a superpower perspective, in my opinion. So yes, it can be, in that sense, it can also be captured, right? Because that would be a super suboptimal solution, even though I think over time it would also break their power. But that might take that would be a much longer path, right? That might take like 100 or longer years before that settles itself. So I do think people should be alert to the fact that these new technologies can be captured. I do think these new technologies create a new game board. And I think, and that's where I agree with people like Lynn Holden, who point to the fact that Bitcoin is actually a new kind of monetary technology I mean, Safedin Ammous in the Bitcoin Standard actually also argues, like when you look at history, you continually see these new monetary technologies, and then people converge like Schelling points on the best technology, the hardest money technique, or the one that gives you the most control. And basically what Lynn Alden is arguing is that Bitcoin now is able to update the settlement time of money, right? Where before you needed like a central point of trust, like a bank or a central bank, you can now erase that and update the entire monetary layer in that way. So I think in that sense, a new game board is being developed and set up. And I think that sort of fits the deglobalization that's happening and the commodities play. I think superpowers know that the old games that they used to play with total control are over. I think they can't reach total control, but they can, in their own area of influence, there they can reach total control. But I think on a global or planetary scale, it has become very difficult to reach that level of control. And that's, I think, why they shift their game. And Trump knows this. I think he's surrounded, like what you wanted to say with the Xi meeting, President Xi, the people that Trump took along with him to that meeting are very telling. And usually they're very like, oh, look at me. And they didn't do that this time. So that's very, very interesting that they, so yeah, I think President Xi and Trump will have a very difficult time to reach an agreement, because I think both of them don't want to cede power or influence because they don't trust each other, rightfully so. So I think it won't be settled this time, but it will be like a back and forth, a tit for tat, but they will use each back and forth in order to consolidate their power at their home front. So I think they're using the tension between them in order to consolidate power at home and to build it out further at home. But I think it will be very difficult to reach a total understanding where they fully trust. I think that's more or less impossible, to be honest. But yeah, so it will be the tension will be there. I think it will remain there.
Excellent. Well, I mean, other than just giving you guys the opportunity to give any other input or comments that you might have on that particular meeting with Trump and Xi, I was hoping to maybe cover a little bit of the Clarity Act and this whole UFO disclosure situation. So I just kind of wanted to give both of you the opportunity to add any other comments, kind of button up that subject.
You want to go first, Hedy?
Yeah, mine will be, like, as I said, short and sweet. So I think you're correct. Your assumption is correct that they're going to carry on rubbing up against each other until they create an understanding. But I also, at the same time, I think they already have an understanding.
Yeah,
I think it's been very clear from the outset that there's a lot of theater, but the theater's there for a reason. I think China has got to a point where they have shown the US that they no longer are on a leash. And that was clear with them offloading. Japan has done the same now, offloading their treasuries and moving to gold. So China specifically has converted to gold. So they've been buying as much gold as possible because it's a safe bet and it's safer than the treasury. And it's also pointing to the US saying, we can play a game and who can last the longest here. So it's really just rubbing up against each other. That's all it is. I think they will come to an understanding. I think it's clear the US needs access to their market. So the US businesses need access to their market. I think China does understand that it's a game of chicken. So China understands they can't take it all the way because they'll burn. And the US understands that they can't take it all the way because they'll burn themselves in the process. So I think it's really a game of chicken to see how far can we push each other to get to where we need to be. I think we just need to remember that we're just spectators in the sport, and we're just constantly buying tickets to pay for the event. So if we view it from that perspective, we're footing the bill while the theatre plays out in front of us. It's really about the economies are too big to fail, and so is the global economy, and there are players in there that are too big to fail. And we forget that it's overshadowed that Putin is going to China straight afterwards. So this is a three-pronged approach to solving the problems we have in the world today. So I think it's all speculation. Let's put it that way. It's all speculation.
Oh yeah.
I think they already have a plan. They already know what they need to do. I think Europe has been left out of it. If you watch how it's been playing out, the global South has definitely been left out of it, but China and Russia haven't left them out of it. So I think that's still yet to play out.
I think the global South is where they will move next, right? I think Latin America will be cleaned up. They'll clean up their backyard, and it will be integrated within the new American empire. I think it won't be like provinces. I don't see it like that, but there will be sort of like a trade agreements, like European style trade agreements between that area and the US, very close ties. And I think Africa and Southeast Asia is actually very interesting. I think Southeast Asia will do very well. It's a very interesting area. And like you say, like most countries are moving towards a neutral settlement layer, which is gold, right? Like you say, China has been devaluing against gold because it needed to devalue. And Japan other countries are doing the same thing. And Bitcoin is still too small, right, to jump in. But it will grow. And I think that's another thing why I'm also very positive about Bitcoin, because it needs to grow in order to become what it needs to become, right? So at some point, either the US or others will start, really moving into Bitcoin in a big way. But that in the meantime, America can play the gold game. They do have enough reserves to, play along in the gold game. But at some point, I do see this transition from gold to Bitcoin. And apart from that, I think I mostly agree. I think the Clarity Act is, that's what I said. It was like Venezuela. First meeting with C on rare earths. Now that didn't really go anywhere. First tariffs, then meeting with C on rare earths, that didn't go anywhere. Then Venezuela, then the move on Iran. Now Iran is, and then just before that, Greenland, then Iran. Now that is sort of over. And now he moves back again to the Clarity Act. Clarity Act is more or less over. UFO disclosure. So he's really sort of ticking these boxes as he moves towards the midterms. And many people say he can't win the midterms, and I totally understand why people say that. And I think he will have a very difficult time to win them. But my opinion has always been that he's first of all, he's a master of theater. He's the circus master. If anybody knows how to play the media, it's Trump. And he knows that timing is essential and that people have the attention span of like a fly. So you need to move what you do as close to the midterms as possible. So I think he's, and you got this really big UAP build up, it's almost like an orchestra. Somebody's, behind the scenes playing this orchestra, and they're building it up beautifully from the ground up. And around Roswell time, which is like June, July, you got the celebration of Roswell, and you got a lot of UFO activity. And the rumor is that Trump is going to have a speech around that time about UFO disclosure, and that he will reveal something really big. Around the same time, you have Skinwalker Ranch going into its next season, which will probably hit a climax as they unearth a UFO in the Utah Basin. Is my opinion. I think we will have disclosure on real-time TV, like the Americans like it, because that's more real than reality. And then on top of that, you have this sort of constant attention build-up of UFO disclosure. And then Trump will be the first president who discloses this, and that will have. I think people are underestimating, like, if you actually disclose something like that, what that means, like, because it has ramifications on every possible imaginary level. If it's true, and we don't know if it's true, many people still disbelieve, which is fine. I don't know either. It's pure speculation. But if it's true, if any of it is true, it will change everything. And then he will be, just before the midterms, the president who revealed the truth of this. He might actually also throw some people in jail that he doesn't like, and present that as like something really great. And there might have been like a settlement with China around that time. Bitcoin might make a jump up, right? So I think he's orchestrating a big, and of course, don't forget the stimmy checks, because the stimmy checks are about to hit. What was it? June, July, I think it was. So people will get a huge financial boost around that time, and they feel great. So I wouldn't be surprised if he actually does sort of hang on in the midterms, especially if Iran goes away.
So
I guess we'll find out.
Yeah. So is this the perfect storm for a third term for Trump if suddenly aliens are real?
I think if he can pull this up, I do think within the deep state there's a lot of pushback. Like I think that's not a circus, or I think there's a lot of elements within the deep state. If you have like an 80-year cover-up, there must be elements within the deep state who don't want this disclosed. And you saw the CIA doing this cover-up, even though it was earlier and not like recent as they claimed. But there is this tension building up with Anna Paulina Luna, saying like, whoever burns or destroys these files and doesn't deliver them back goes into prison, like they're performing criminal acts. So there's this tension between the Department of Defense, the ODNI, and the CIA, and the Air Force, and the Department of Energy, of course, have been very closely involved with the cover-up. Plus, Trump's allies are in the Department of Defense, or Department of War, as it's called, and in the office of what is it? ODNI, National Intelligence. So because Tulsi Gabbard is in National Intelligence, so they have National Intelligence and have the Department of War, but the CIA is still rogue, like totally rogue entity. I would say that the banking system is also rogue, with JP Morgan is fighting hard to keep his power base. But so you got certain elements within the administration that are not fully under control, and I think what we're going to see is sort of a battle between different departments over basically full control, and then people will cheer it on like, yeah, let's centralize power. Great idea. So, which is like a win-win from a Trump perspective, of course, because you want to centralize power. So I think that would be that's my prediction for the coming months, that there will be a lot more circus and a lot more crazy stuff, and more big revelations is my prediction. And that's it.
I was hoping one of you would say something, because right at this moment they just started building the apartment here. It's really wonderful, the timing of when these people decide to just do renovations on their apartments. It's so great. But hey,
I know the feeling.
Yeah, what I was hoping we could cover a little more, and you touched on a lot of those subjects, Nick. God damn it. Is a few things. One is, of course, what have we heard about stimulus checks? Is that supposed to happen? And from what? Because obviously the tariffs are supposed to be refunded, right? I mean, what's up with that? Refunded to the companies, refunded to the people who actually paid them. But also, what do you think is the role of the UFO disclosure? Do you think it's just because of what it would mean if Trump actually comes out and says, aliens are real, and being the first person to actually come out and say that, in spite of everything else?
No. I think there's a couple of things. Like, first of all, the first question is easy. They'll print it. They'll just print whatever they need to print. Right? They're doing that anyway. They'll just print in order to survive. So they'll just print some stimmy checks. So that's not a big deal, I think. But the other one is more interesting, because I think, apart from the fact that if this is real, it would change everything. And you already saw some pastors being invited by government officials to talk about what it would mean for their followers and for religion in general. And the Catholic Church has been on this forever. And of course, you now have an American Pope, which is also very interesting, Leo, which is also interesting, but it's another story. But I think what he's actually going to do with, I think they're weaponizing the files. I've been saying that for a long time. But if it's true and there is a cover-up by certain elements in the deep state, and we all know that, certain people have been trying to kill Trump, right? I mean, there were 3 assassination attempts, and some people say it's all fake, and perhaps it is, I don't know. But the first one seemed legit, as far as I can tell, and the second one probably too. The third one, I don't know, maybe not. But clearly there has been a gigantic pushback against Trump, getting him in jail, all that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying he doesn't deserve to be in jail, but they have been trying to get him there. And I think if he loses, they will get him there. But and those people that are doing that are part of the legacy system, right? And the legacy system apparently has been involved in an 80-year cover-up. So, and in the Epstein files, they're talking about JP Morgan as a very important player. So, and as you have a shift from the Federal Reserve to the Treasury to Besant, and JP Morgan being one of the biggest owners of the Federal Reserve behind the scenes, and this cover-up, deep state cover-up, which needs financialization, that must come from central banking. If Trump reveals the full truth, plus right, with AI, like we're moving into a future where all these secrets are coming out anyway, right? You can't hide this stuff anymore with AI. As AI explodes, it will become harder and harder to hide the truth, right? So why not use it to your advantage and blow your opponents out of the water, centralize power, be the hero while doing it, and win the midterms? I think it's like a win-win-win-win.
It sounds interesting that all these things culminate after. So, am I just drawing at straws here and connecting dots that aren't there? With Mythos coming out with Anthropic, trying to take over Anthropic, nationalize it, and then suddenly it's breaking everything that's out there. And now we're going to just tell the world that, in a boring way, that aliens exist, and we know they exist. And it's not just us, Russia and China know it as well. So it's super interesting that we're at this point that it's almost like forcing their hands.
Yeah,
maybe, I don't know. Or maybe it's just a very elaborate theater.
No, it's both, right? I mean, it's definitely also a very elaborate theater, but I think it's also like with complexity theory, and you have like this equilibrium. You got a point of equilibrium, and then you move to another point of equilibrium, but you have this period of chaos in between. You have to move from one point to the other. And I think that's what's happening here. Like they're trying to navigate this new, moving towards this new equilibrium, and then making the most out of the chaos. But the point is, like, if all this stuff is actually real, and you've got like different kind of source of energy and propulsion and technology, and of course all the philosophical and cultural elements that come with it, but especially the technological part, then at some point, if this has been building up underneath in the deep state, you want to turn it public so that more researchers can have access to it and build it up to the next level. But you also just want to upgrade the entire society to that level, right? Because if the technology is real, why wouldn't you want to upgrade society while also keeping it under control, right? So you now got the technology to control society. You got CBDCs, stable coins. You can put everybody in a straitjacket. So as everybody's put into a straitjacket, then you can reveal these kind of truths while keeping society under control. So I think the technology is ready. They can't keep it under control much longer because they're all playing the same game, and the first superpower who reveals this truth wins a very big prize. And you can actually level up society and take it to the next level. And then I think that will also help people to stop rebelling, right? Because if you have abundance, people will be more satisfied than if you have scarcity, right? So if the pie grows, there's less reason to fight each other, also within society. But you do want to check the people within society, right? If you don't want to let this out of the box before you sort of have all the control mechanisms in place. But it's a difficult dance. I think it's a dance, and that's sort of my take. I think it's really out there. It is, and I'm connecting dots, of course, and it's pure speculation. And I'm probably
yours is utopic, because I would verge on dystopic, because that gives them more control. So they would probably want to play the dystopic because that would create more control for them. Utopic and abundance wouldn't give them more control. In fact, that would push us out again.
Yeah, but I think you can have both, right? You can create this sort of specter out in space that you have to fight. Perhaps evil alien entity or empire or whatever. Starship Troopers, while revealing and using the tech to upgrade society and creating abundance, while also having the checks in place, like stable coins and CBDCs that can track and robotics and drones and AI to monitor behavior in real time and turn people on and off.
This is the Patriot Act all over again. So like, create the enemy, common enemy, we all need to attack. This is what we need to put in place. We all have to come together and agree that we're going to do this, because you're not clever enough to know anything other, and we know the best because we know it. So this is the rule.
But I think at the same time, you can actually also create abundance because you do have those technologies at your disposal. But then you can sort of say, okay, you have access to so much abundance, and you have access. If you toe the party line and you say the right things, or perhaps think the right things, if they have Neuralink. Then
the candy shop. You get the candy shop, but you need to do this. Do you want the candy? Okay, got it.
Yeah, but it's difficult, right? I'm not sure if it's even possible, but I think that's sort of what they're getting at. The only problem with my theory would then be like, why all the trouble with energy flows if there is abundant energy anyway, right? So why do you fight over oil and gas and all that stuff? So it might be like further way off. Maybe it will take a while to get there. I don't know.
Sorry, Fry, I cut you off a few times.
No, you guys are great. You're having a great discussion, and it seems like every time it's my turn to talk, they start drilling again. It's just the luck of my day. But no, Nick, I think you also made a good point there as well with regards to what you were saying about how it could kind of be played both ways, right? I mean, I always took it as with J.D. Vance and even some other political leaders coming out and saying things like, oh, they're demons, right? I thought it was just a way of preparing the masses for if there is disclosure to prevent them from thinking, well, we have to give up our Bibles because suddenly this is this is flawed belief now, because there's a way it can be true, and if it's referring to demons rather than aliens. And I've heard people too make the argument that if you actually read your Bible, believing that there's aliens doesn't contradict with the word. But that's a whole nother discussion. My next part to this is going to be very selfish, but do you think this disclosure will happen soon? Because I win a lot of money if they make this month on Polymarket and say that aliens are real. I win a little bit less if they do next month, and I get my money back if they do by the end of the year. So I'm curious what you guys think of that.
Well, you already know my answer, right? I think he will disclose it before the midterms, and I think they're building up to it. Remember that around that time, there's also this Spielberg film, Disclosure Day, also coming out. So you got this whole sort of build up. That's in my view, it has been orchestrated, right? Because YouTube can ban and censor anybody, right? I know, I've been living it. So why are all these UFO shows not being banned, right? Because they're revealing all kinds of stuff about whistleblowers saying this, about the CIA that. It's all very it's very disturbing if it's true, right? So, and if it's not true, right, why would they tolerate this on YouTube? So at some level, the people behind these big tech companies, which are in bed with Trump, are pushing this sort of groundswell, and they've been preparing this for years, because remember, under Trump 1, 2017, this whole UAP disclosure thing started with the New York Times article, and the Nimitz and the Tic Tac UFO events. That was all Trump 1, and that's also when the Space Force was launched, right? So I think Trump has been sort of is connected with the military. I think there's a good connection between the top brass in the military and Trump. And I think that the military also has something like, if we have these technologies to destroy our enemies, like, why aren't we using them to destroy our enemies, right? So why are we being infiltrated, right? So I think from a nationalistic perspective, and I think, like I said, I think Trump is a Jacksonian isolationist. Only you can't isolate yourself in this world, even though he's going to try it. But then you also want to arm yourself with high-tech weapon systems, and you want to move into space because that's where the economy is, and Trump is the man of the economy. And also you want a homogeneous, close border, one religion style society, which you can sort of build around a revival of the church, right? And then only update it with aliens. So I think, Catholicism and Protestantism have been very prevalent and very strong within America. I mean, that's sort of where the base is, especially Protestantism. So I think they just want to update Christianity and use that as a state religion. It's basically Empire 2.0. It's like Constantine all over again. So only like for this century. And that's my reading of all of this. So this year, but disclosure is a rolling thing, right? Remember when they first came out with those videos in 2017, and everybody said, "Whoa!" And now they're throwing like 50 of those videos, and people say, it's just grainy videos. And then you got the first whistleblower, David Grush, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, somebody from the deep state just came out," and now it's just more whistleblowers. So it's, they're desensitizing people to, but they're building it up, right? You get more and more revelations. Only the question is, at what point do people actually believe it, right? Even if they unearth a UFO during Skinwalker Ranch, which I think they will, do people then believe that they unearthed a UFO, or did they say, "Oh no, somebody put it there," or it's a reality show, or fill in blank, right? So I don't know if it's ever.
I'm looking forward to it, and I just hope he does it soon. I'll make a lot of money. But yeah, I agree with you. I do think sometime this year we're going to get that disclosure, and I suppose we'll see how soon it happens. We'll see if the pressure from other countries coming out and wanting to suddenly be so transparent is going to rush Trump to make a really fun speech one of these days coming up soon. I could totally see it. I think the last thing I was hoping we could cover is the Clarity Act. I'd had a debate with a friend about this recently. And as you guys know, I mean, I'm an ANCAP, so, I don't trust any government regulation, but I don't really need to go into it further than that. I just wanted to know how you both felt about the Clarity Act, what good may come of it, if any, and what bad, and just your perspectives. And I think we can wrap.
You first, Hedy?
I'm going to say that I am not close enough to it to have an informed decision. The only feeling I get from it is...
Oh, you were gone for 1 second.
Oh, I was gone. Okay, sorry. So I'll just say again, I haven't got an informed decision on it because I haven't followed it closely enough. I just think because of the toing and froing, I think you're not going to get the Clarity Act you want. I think you're going to get what people are willing to give. And I'm assuming, but Nick, you can talk to this more, that I assume there's something in there that, or more than one thing that people don't want in it. So there are a few compromises, but I haven't looked at it, to be honest, because I don't think it changes anything.
No, I think it's a compromise. I mean, it is a compromise, right? They had to get the Democrats on board, otherwise, it would strand. I did predict it would happen, right? I mean, I would have been very surprised if they didn't reach some kind of conclusion, which they have. And I think the compromise is in the sense that the legacy banking system wants to have a piece of the pie, right? And they realize that they have to get into crypto in order to get a piece of the pie. And of course, they had a whole debate about yield on stable coins. And of course, they tweaked it in such a way that the banking system is still relevant and stays relevant, and that the crypto companies can't simply, that Coinbase simply can't replace them from one day to the next, even though I think they would have liked that. So from my perspective, the problem with this compromise is, well, first of all, in my view, well, let's say it's good for the price, right? We now have clarity, so institutions can get into Bitcoin and crypto. So from a price perspective, dollar price perspective, it's a good thing if you're an investor. From an institutional standpoint, it's also positive because now you have clarity. So now you can make decisions and allocate, and also if you're a company, etc. So that's all good. I'm more of a libertarian. I would say I'm a classical liberal more than a libertarian, but I do sort of share more and more libertarian sentiments. And since, in my view, because of the dollar system and how it was set up and my own research over the years, I've come to the conclusion that the current system is hopelessly corrupt. And if there is an 80+ year deep state cover up, that says it all, right? I mean, you don't get more corrupt than that. So then it becomes kind of like, why do we need these people to regulate this market for us to keep us safe from them, right? Because they would then be the biggest danger out there. So in my perspective, we need regulation, but we don't need their regulation. And secondly, I think the compromise means that more of the legacy corruption will seep into the new system, which is probably also already corrupt, but might make it even more corrupt. And so that's my take of the Clarity Act, but it sort of also ties into all the stuff that I earlier said about they need these stable coins from a geopolitical perspective, because America needs to roll out its stable coins in order to work their debt, right? They need new debtors in order to service the American system. But at the same time, it's also a weapon aimed at Russia and China and everybody who's not listening. And also political opponents, right? Because I think, with CBDCs and stable coins, but especially with CBDCs, you can simply take out your opponents. So in a sense, it's the end of democracy and the end of politics, right? Because why do you need to keep up the charade if you can just turn off your enemy and you can track them in real time? If you're in power and you have these mechanisms of control, like why wouldn't you use them to stop them in their tracks? I think it's a weapon that they're developing, and they had to move it forward. And whoever gets into control, like if Trump does lose the midterms, I think it will. I think the next person in power will have these levers of control, and they will stay in power for a very long time. So it will be used inward and outward, and the Clarity Act is sort of the means to move forward.
Yeah, well, you need the stablecoin issuers to continue to buy US treasuries. That's one part, which is to prop up the dollar and to keep it underwritten, for lack of a better expression. I think I'm going to pull on another thread. Isn't it interesting how Michael Saylor has been talking post the Clarity Act?
You want to elaborate that a little bit, because I haven't been following Michael Saylor.
No, there's just a big hoo-ha about him obviously talking about new financial products in DeFi and that aren't preferential shares and normal shares
So that
in
stretch
Bitcoin treasury companies.
Yeah. I mean, I think BlackRock is one of the biggest shareholders of Strategy, right? If I'm not mistaken. So
He wasn't talking about Strategy. I think he was talking, is it Liquid? And there's another one he was talking about.
okay.
So there's different ones that are buying Strategy, and then they are like, so it was just interesting post this Clarity Act that now you have, it seems the exact same things that are happening in traditional finance now coming into Bitcoin on top of it. So you've got all of this house of cards that could easily fall over. I'm not educated enough to comment too deeply on it, but it just appears to be the same system.
It's the same
building
system.
the same system out, and whether he's inside of it, not inside of it.
Yeah. Now, you know, I mean, Saylor is smart and he has some great speeches, and not everything he says is nonsense. But I do see him as an agent of chaos, right? I think they are just building the old system on new rails, and he's one of them. So I'm not surprised by any of this, and he's ideally suited to go ahead and build those products, which he already has. Of course, he has some really wild products out there, and but I think for people like us who believe in freedom and the individual and sovereignty and self-reliability, I do think it will be very difficult in the coming years, you know, to keep that flame alive and to counteract these forces. I think it will depend a lot on the technology itself and how it develops, you know, like how AI will develop, if it stays centralized or becomes more decentralized, and the same goes for Bitcoin, and of course also for the people, like you say, with narratives. Are the people waking up, or are they going back to sleep again? So I don't know. There's a lot of questions, big questions.
Yep, it's I think we spend a lot of time talking about these things, but we don't talk about the purpose of government. I think that's where we're distracted by all of these, you know, like our aliens and AI and the Clarity Act, but we actually don't talk about the purpose of government. I think we need to have more conversations about the purpose of government and really scrutinize it from first principles. And I think it was Peter McCormack, I was watching his latest, or one of his latest, and his suggestion was that government should be mandated to reduce by 1% per year. So they should decrease their size by 1% per year.
Good luck.
So we can slowly, over time, we get back to a normal size of government and obviously of expenditure, which I thought was actually interesting. So you're not trying to take all the medicine at once. It's 1% per year, which sounds plausible, to be honest. I actually thought that was really clever.
I do actually. In my next piece, I think it will be a 4-piece set. Like, I finished the first 2 pieces, and the next one is sort of half finished. I sort of go into these new sort of government systems that a little bit, not very much, but I sort of touch upon it. And then there will be a 4th piece, and then sort of my geopolitical series is sort of done. But yeah, I think I think there will be different government models out there. Like I already mentioned, sort of the Amish style things that I think are happening and are accelerating, these circular economies, and but also technates, and you also have the other end of that spectrum, And I do think because of the different board game, the different setup of the map, because of these technologies, I do think there will be less and more freedom at the same time. I think certain areas will consolidate and become almost sort of like extremely totalitarian. But at the same time, because they can't control all of it at the same time, you will also have areas of extreme freedom and, perhaps even libertarian settlements and that kind of stuff. So I think you will probably have both at the same time. Yeah, experiments in government. Yeah.
A failed experiment, right? No, that's just my point of view, But no, I think we've had some great talk on these subjects today, and I'm definitely in agreement with you guys that we don't ask ourselves enough what the role of government is supposed to be. Because I think if we could figure out what it was at least supposed to be, we might see how far off the mark we might have gone. And I think that that's an important discussion to have. I think we covered some great topics today, and if you guys are ready, we can go ahead and wrap. But yeah, again, thank you guys again for being on this DeFi Expectations to host this talk. I think we've really covered a lot of ground, and I'm looking forward to hearing more talk and hopefully seeing these situations get better, at least for those of us that can be informed and try to make our lives as peaceful as possible, because there is a world outside of these games, there really is, and we can be happy not just in spite of, but with indifference to some of the decisions of our government. So thank you guys again for doing this talk, and everyone for watching another episode of DeFi Expectations.
Take care.
Perfect.